The security guard wouldn't look at me while Derek Vanderbilt sat in my chair, scrolling through my computer like he owned the place. 20 years of client files, system architecture, relationship notes, all being rifled through by a 28-year-old who probably couldn't tell the difference between a compliance framework and a coffee filter. Andrea from HR stood behind him holding that damn cardboard box, her hands shaking like she was about to hand me a death sentence instead of my personal belongings. "You'll need to sign these separation documents," she said quietly, still not meeting my eyes. "Derek has been appointed Senior Director of Client Solutions, effective immediately. I'm Michael Harrington, 51 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years building Sterling Financial Systems into the industry leader for banking software compliance. Before that, I spent 5 years in the Navy as an information systems technician aboard the USS Enterprise. When you're responsible for maintaining communication systems that keep 5,000 sailors alive at sea, you learn pretty fast that relationships and reliability matter more than credentials. That mindset built my career. It was also about to save it. Let me take you back to how I got here. It's 2004, and I'm fresh out of the Navy, looking for work in the civilian tech sector. Sterling Financial was a 12-person startup operating out of a converted warehouse in Austin, Texas. The founder, Richard Sterling, had a vision for banking compliance software, but zero understanding of how to actually build client relationships or manage implementation. Their biggest problem wasn't technology. It was that every client they signed ended up canceling within 6 months because nobody could explain how the damn systems actually worked. I started as an implementation specialist, basically the guy they sent in after sales closed a deal to actually make the software work. My first assignment was Pinnacle Banking Group, a regional bank with 47 branches that was drowning in regulatory requirements after the 2008 financial crisis. Their VP of Compliance, Gerald Whitmore, was about to fire Sterling after 3 failed implementation attempts by our previous team. I spent the first meeting just listening. Gerald talked for 2 hours about his problems. Understaffed compliance team, outdated systems, regulators breathing down his neck, and a CEO who didn't understand why they couldn't just use Excel spreadsheets like the old days. When he finished, I didn't pitch him Sterling's features or throw around technical jargon. I just said, "I can fix this, but I need 90 days and direct access to your compliance team. No sales interference, no executive presentations. Just let me work." Something in my approach must have resonated because Gerald gave me the shot. For the next 90 days, I practically lived at Pinnacle's headquarters. I learned their processes inside and out, identified exactly where Sterling's software needed customization, and trained their compliance team personally. When regulators showed up for their quarterly audit, Pinnacle passed with 0 findings for the first time in 3 years. Gerald called me into his office that afternoon. "Michael, that was remarkable. How did you know exactly what we needed?" "I spent 5 years in the Navy making sure communication systems worked under pressure," I told him. "The technology is the easy part. Understanding what people actually need, that's the real job." That conversation started a relationship that would define both our careers. As Gerald rose through the ranks at Pinnacle, VP to SVP to COO to CEO, I was the one constant. Every software upgrade, every regulatory change, every crisis that needed someone who understood both the technology and the human side of compliance. When Pinnacle acquired 3 smaller banks in 2013, Gerald insisted Sterling handle all the systems integration. When new SEC regulations hit in 2016, I was in Gerald's office within hours with the implementation roadmap. But it wasn't just professional. I attended Gerald's daughter's college graduation in 2011, sent flowers when his father passed away in 2015. When his son struggled with addiction, Gerald called me at 2 a.m., not because I could fix it, but because I listened. And when my wife Sarah died from breast cancer in 2018, Gerald was at the funeral, sitting in the back pew, not making it about himself, but just being there. By 2024, Pinnacle had grown into a $12 billion regional banking powerhouse with 240 branches across 6 states. Their annual contract with Sterling was worth $90 million, representing 38% of our total revenue. And that relationship existed because Gerald Whitmore trusted exactly one person at Sterling Financial Systems: me. What Richard Sterling and his board didn't understand, or chose not to see, was that this wasn't just a vendor relationship. This was 20 years of trust, crisis management, and personal connection that couldn't be replicated by someone with an MBA and a firm handshake. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about what I sacrificed to build that relationship. My son, Evan, was 8 years old when Sarah got her diagnosis in 2017. Stage 3 breast cancer, aggressive treatment protocol, surgeries, and chemo that made her too weak to get out of bed most days. I was working 60-hour weeks managing our largest clients, while trying to be present for Sarah's appointments and Evan's needs. Something had to give, and it was usually Evan's baseball games, school events, and the everyday moments that kids remember. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in March 2018. Evan was 9 years old, and I was suddenly a single father trying to hold together a career and raise a son who'd just lost his mother. The next 6 years were a blur of early mornings and late nights, missed soccer practices, and parent-teacher conferences I arrived at 20 minutes late. Last year, when Evan made the freshman basketball team, I missed his first 3 games because Gerald needed emergency support during a surprise regulatory audit. "Dad, you coming to the game Friday?" Evan asked one evening last month, not quite looking at me. "Absolutely, buddy. Wouldn't miss it. You said that last time. And the time before." That hit harder than I expected. "Work emergency," I explained weakly. "It won't happen again." "Sure, Dad." He turned back to his homework, and I saw Seraph in the way he set his jaw. Disappointed but not surprised, learning not to count on me being there. I thought all of it, the sacrifices, the late nights, the missed moments, was building toward something. A promotion to VP of Client Relations, maybe even a seat on the executive team. I'd been dropping hints to Richard Sterling for the past 2 years. Our retention rate was 94%, highest in the industry. Client satisfaction scores consistently above 9.2 out of 10. And Pinnacle's $90 million contract renewal I'd personally negotiated had just been signed 3 months ago. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. I prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how I'd grown our client portfolio by 310% over 20 years, maintained relationships that generated $240 million in annual recurring revenue, and personally managed implementations that had 0 failures in the past 8 years. I had spreadsheets, testimonials, and a detailed plan for expanding our enterprise client division. Richard flipped through my portfolio for maybe 3 minutes before setting it aside. "Michael, this is impressive work." Really impressive. But I've been thinking about the future direction of our client services division. We need fresh perspectives, new energy, modern approaches to client relationship management. There it was. The buzzword salad that meant someone had decided my 20 years of proven results wasn't as valuable as youth and credentials. "My nephew Derek just completed his MBA at Wharton," Richard continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "Top of his class, specialized in client relationship management and digital transformation. He's going to be joining us as Senior Director of Client Solutions." Senior Director. That was the title I'd been working toward for 5 years, the position that should have been mine based on every conceivable metric except having the right last name. "And where does that leave me?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral the way they taught us in the Navy, when officers made decisions that made no sense. You'll continue in your current role as Principal Implementation Specialist. Derek will need someone experienced to help him get oriented with our key accounts. Your institutional knowledge will be invaluable during his transition. Institutional knowledge. Corporate speak for, we need you to train your replacement while he gets the title, the salary, and the credit for relationships you spent 20 years building. I understand, I said slowly. When does Derek start? Monday. Maybe you could prepare some orientation materials this weekend? Key client profiles, relationship histories, that sort of thing. That's when something shifted in my mind. I'd been working weekends for 20 years. I'd missed my wife's last month because I was managing client crises. I'd watched my son learn to stop counting on me because Sterling Financial Systems always came first. And now they wanted me to spend my weekend preparing training materials for the CEO's nephew. I stood up, shook Richard's hand with a professional courtesy that was pure muscle memory at this point, and walked out of his office. But instead of going back to my desk, I walked straight to the parking garage, got in my car, and sat there staring at my phone. Evan had sent me a text an hour earlier. Dad, game tonight at 7. Coach says I might start. Hope you can make it. For the first time in 3 years, I was going to make it, because I'd just made a decision that was going to change everything. See, what Richard and Derek didn't understand was that my job description was actually pretty basic. Coordinate client implementation and support within assigned account portfolio. Maintain relationships with key stakeholders. Respond to client inquiries and escalations during business hours. Standard corporate language that said absolutely nothing about what I actually did every day. What I actually did was answer Gerald Whitmore's calls at 10 p.m. when he had questions about new SEC regulations. I flew to Pinnacle's headquarters in Denver on 48 hours' notice when they had compliance crises. I managed personal relationships with 15 other banking executives whose trust in Sterling existed solely because they trusted me. But my job description said business hours and assigned responsibilities. So that's exactly what I was going to do. I drove home and did something I hadn't done in years. I turned off my work phone at 6 p.m. and put it in a drawer. Evan was shocked when I walked in the door at 6:30. Dad, why are you home so early? I decided my priorities were wrong, I told him. Grabbed my keys and wallet. Let's get dinner before your game. My treat. His face lit up in a way that made me realize just how long it had been since I'd been present for him. Not physically present while checking my phone every 5 minutes, but actually there. Wednesday morning, I arrived at the office at exactly 9 a.m. No early morning prep work, no getting ahead of potential issues, no checking systems before anyone else arrived. I sat down at my desk and started working through my official responsibilities in order of priority. By 10:30, my phone was ringing. Sarah Mitchell from our account management team, voice tight with stress. Michael, did you see the email from Pinnacle? They're having issues with the new compliance module we deployed last week. Gerald's trying to reach you. I pulled up the email. Routine technical issue, the kind I normally handled in 15 minutes. I forwarded it to our technical support team. That's a Tier 2 technical issue, I said calmly. I've forwarded it to the appropriate department. They'll respond within the standard 24-hour support window. But you always handle Pinnacle issues directly. Gerald specifically asked for you. I'm focusing on my core implementation responsibilities today. The support team is fully capable of handling technical troubleshooting. There was a long pause. Michael, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Sarah. Just being more efficient with my time and responsibilities. She hung up, sounding confused, which made sense. Nobody at Sterling had ever bothered to understand what my actual job was, versus what I'd been doing for 20 years. By Thursday afternoon, the cracks were starting to show. Gerald had called 3 more times, getting routed to different departments because I was following the official escalation protocols instead of my usual practice of giving him my direct cell number. Derek had tried introducing himself to 2 of my other key clients. Both meetings had gone poorly because Derek kept talking about digital transformation strategies and leveraging synergies, while the clients wanted to discuss their actual compliance needs. Marcus Webb from Frontier National Bank called me directly at 3 p.m. "Michael, what the hell is going on?" Some kid named Derek called me talking about restructuring our relationship and optimizing touch points. I told him I'd only work with you, and he said you were transitioning to a support role. That's correct, Marcus. Derek is now Senior Director of Client Solutions. He'll be your primary point of contact going forward. Like hell he will. You know our CFO personally? Michael, you were at our board retreat last year. This Derek kid doesn't even understand our regulatory environment. I asked him about the new FinCEN requirements, and he gave me a sales pitch about software features. Derek is very qualified, Marcus. He has an MBA from Wharton. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. I don't give a damn about his MBA. I care about having someone who understands banking compliance and returns my calls. If Sterling is replacing you with someone like Derek, we need to talk about whether this partnership still makes sense. That's a conversation you'll need to have with Derek or Richard Sterling, I said. I'm no longer handling strategic account relationships. The silence on the other end lasted about 10 seconds. You serious right now, Michael? Completely. I'm focusing on my core job responsibilities. Well then, I'll be making some calls. He hung up. I imagined he was already dialing competitors, getting quotes for switching their $8 million annual contract to someone else. Derek probably wouldn't even know until the cancellation notice arrived. Thursday night, I was home by 5:30 p.m. Evan and I cooked dinner together. Well, I grilled steaks while he made a salad and told me about his biology project. For the first time in months, I wasn't mentally composing emails or worrying about client crises. I was just there, present, listening to my 14-year-old son talk about cellular respiration like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. You seem different this week, Dad, Evan said as we cleaned up. Less stressed. I made some changes at work. Decided I was giving too much and not getting enough back. Is that why you've been home for dinner all week? Exactly. I wasn't going to miss your basketball game last week, and I'm not going to miss the next one either. He grinned. Good. Because Coach says I'm starting next week. Friday morning brought the real crisis. I arrived at 9 a.m. to find the office in full chaos mode. People were running between conference rooms, executives were on phone calls, looking increasingly panicked, and Derek was sitting in a glass office looking like someone had just run over his dog. Sarah Mitchell intercepted me before I reached my desk. Michael, thank God. We need you in conference room A immediately. Gerald Whitmore has called an emergency meeting, and he's threatening to terminate Pinnacle's contract. When's the meeting? In 20 minutes. I checked my calendar. I have a quarterly compliance review scheduled at 10 a.m. That's due to the SEC by end of business today. Can't be rescheduled. Forget the compliance review. Pinnacle is 38% of our revenue. If Gerald pulls that contract, Sterling is finished. I understand Pinnacle is important. However, missing the SEC compliance deadline results in automatic penalties starting at $50,000 per day and a potential license review. That would affect all our clients, not just Pinnacle. Sarah stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. Who are you right now? I'm the principal implementation specialist following my job description. The Pinnacle relationship falls under the Senior Director of Client Solutions responsibilities now. That's Derek's role. Her face went pale. Michael, Derek has no idea how to handle Gerald Whitmore. He's been with the company for 4 days. Then perhaps this is an excellent learning opportunity for him. I walked to my desk and started preparing the compliance review documentation. Behind me, I could hear Sarah making panicked phone calls. Within 5 minutes, Richard Sterling himself was standing at my desk. "Michael, we need to talk. My office now." I saved my work and followed him. His corner office overlooked downtown Austin, all glass and chrome and the kind of expensive furniture that screamed successful tech company. Richard's face was red, his normally perfect hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. "What is going on with you this week? You've been completely different, not responding to clients, routing everything through standard channels, leaving at 5 p.m. every day." "I'm following my job description, Richard. You said Derek would be handling key client relationships. I'm focusing on my core implementation responsibilities. Don't play games with me. You know exactly what I mean. Gerald Whitmore is sitting in that conference room right now, and he's told Derek he won't speak to anyone except you." Derek tried to explain our new strategic direction, and Gerald cut him off mid-sentence. "That's unfortunate. Perhaps Derek needs more training on client relationship management. We don't have time for training. We have a $90 million contract about to walk out the door. I need you to fix this. I need to complete the SEC compliance review. It's due by 5 p.m. today. The compliance review can wait." Actually, it can't. Federal regulations are pretty clear about deadline requirements. But I'm happy to handle the Pinnacle situation if you'd like to make that my priority. Which one would you prefer I focus on? Richard stared at me, finally understanding that I wasn't bluffing. "Both, obviously." "I can't do both, Richard. Not in the time available. So you need to decide which federal requirement you want me to ignore. SEC compliance or client contractual obligations. Choose carefully, because one of these decisions will cost Sterling its operating license." The color drained from his face. "This is blackmail. This is reality. You've spent 20 years taking my availability for granted." I handled both SEC compliance and Pinnacle crises by working 70-hour weeks, answering calls at midnight, and sacrificing every other aspect of my life. But you decided Derek was a better fit for client relationships, so now you get to see what that actually means. What do you want? I want you to be clear about who actually runs client relationships at this company, because it's not Derek, and we both know it. Before Richard could respond, his desk phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through the speaker, strained and urgent. "Mr. Sterling, Gerald Whitmore says he's leaving in 5 minutes if Michael isn't in that conference room. He's also requested that Derek not be present." Richard looked at me with something between desperation and fury. "Fine. Handle Pinnacle. But this conversation isn't over." I walked to conference room A at exactly 9:47 a.m. Gerald Whitmore sat at the head of the conference table, looking like a man who'd reached the end of his patience. At 61, Gerald had the bearing of someone who'd spent 40 years in banking and had zero tolerance for incompetence. His gray hair was perfectly styled. His suit probably cost more than I made in a month, and his expression could have frozen lava. 2 other people sat with him, his COO, Patricia Hartman, and their general counsel, David Brenner. This wasn't just Gerald being annoyed. This was Pinnacle's executive team preparing to terminate a relationship. "Michael," Gerald said, his voice cold and professional. "Good of you to finally join us." I sat down across from them, my old Navy training kicking in. When you're in a situation you can't control, stay calm and gather information before responding. "I apologize for the delay, Gerald. What seems to be the issue?" Gerald slid a folder across the table. "This Derek Vanderbilt character called me Monday morning to introduce himself as my new point of contact. Told me Sterling was implementing a strategic restructuring of client relationship protocols, and that you'd be transitioning to a support role. When I asked him about the Q4 compliance updates we discussed last month, he had no idea what I was talking about. I nodded, saying nothing. Then, Gerald continued, his voice getting harder, when we discovered issues with the new compliance module you deployed, Derek sent us a form email about standard support procedures and 24-hour response windows. Michael, we've had your cell number for 12 years. You've never made us wait 24 hours for anything. That's correct. The 24-hour response window is Sterling's official policy. I've been providing above and beyond service that apparently wasn't in my official job description. Patricia Hartman leaned forward. Are you telling us you've been fired, Michael? Not fired. Restructured. Derek Vanderbilt is Richard Sterling's nephew, recently graduated from Wharton. The company decided he was better suited for managing strategic client relationships. David Brenner, the lawyer, was taking notes, and nobody at Sterling thought to inform us of this change before implementing it? Apparently not. Gerald's jaw tightened. Let me be very clear about something, Michael. Pinnacle Banking Group has a $90 million annual contract with Sterling Financial Systems. That contract exists because I trust you. Not Sterling, not their software, not their company. You. When my board asked me 3 years ago why we weren't shopping around for competitors, I told them Michael Harrington was worth the premium we pay. I appreciate that, Gerald. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've decided to leave us in the hands of an inexperienced kid with an MBA and no understanding of banking compliance. His voice was ice now. So here's what's going to happen. Either you resume your role as our primary point of contact, with the authority and title that entails, or Pinnacle will immediately begin the process of evaluating alternative vendors. Patricia added, and when we pull our $90 million contract, we'll be encouraging our banking industry colleagues to evaluate their relationships with Sterling as well. Gerald sits on the boards of 3 regional banking associations. Word travels fast. The threat was clear. Gerald wasn't just going to leave. He was going to make sure everyone in the banking industry knew why. Sterling would lose not just Pinnacle, but potentially every banking client in their portfolio. I need to be honest with you, Gerald, I said carefully. I don't have the authority to make that decision. You'll need to discuss this with Richard Sterling or Derek. Gerald stood up. Then get them in here. Now. 5 minutes later, Richard Sterling and Derek Vanderbilt were sitting in conference room A, both looking like they'd walked into an ambush. Derek tried to salvage the situation with a smile, an extended handshake. Mr. Whitmore, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sterling is committed to providing you the same exceptional service. Gerald cut him off. I didn't ask for a sales pitch. I asked for Michael Harrington to be our primary contact with appropriate authority. Can you make that happen? Derek looked to Richard for support. Uncle Richard, maybe we should discuss our strategic vision for... I don't care about your strategic vision, Gerald interrupted. I care about compliance software that works and a relationship manager I trust. You've been with this company for 4 days. Michael has been my partner for 20 years. This isn't complicated mathematics. Richard cleared his throat. Gerald, Derek is highly qualified. He has an MBA from Wharton, specialized training in... Let me stop you right there, Richard. Gerald's voice was pure steel now. I have an MBA from Harvard. Patricia has one from Stanford. David graduated from Yale Law. None of that means anything if you can't do the actual job. Your nephew has credentials. Michael has competence. They're not the same thing. The room went completely silent. So here's my offer, Gerald continued. Michael Harrington becomes Vice President of Client Relations, reporting directly to you. He has full authority over all our strategic accounts, including complete autonomy on how he manages those relationships. His salary, benefits, and authority all reflect that position. Or Pinnacle begins the 90-day termination process, outlined in Section 14 of our contract, and I personally contact every banking CEO I know to tell them why. Richard's face had gone from red to gray. "Gerald, that's non-negotiable," Gerald finished. "I'll give you 24 hours to decide. Michael, I'd like to speak with you privately." Richard and Derek left looking like they'd just witnessed an execution. In a way, they had. When they were gone, Gerald's expression softened slightly. "You didn't tell me you'd been pushed aside, Michael. I didn't want to put you in this position, Gerald." "Bull. You let this play out because you knew exactly what would happen. You're smarter than that." He was right. I'd known the moment Richard scheduled that promotion meeting that this was coming. I just needed Sterling's leadership to understand what they were throwing away. 20 years, Michael. You've never asked me for anything. Never leveraged our relationship. Never used my name to get ahead at Sterling. That's rare. I just wanted to do good work. Well, now you're going to get what you should have had a decade ago. Gerald extended his hand. "Call me this afternoon. Let me know what Richard decides. And Michael, if he's stupid enough to say no, I have a VP of technology position at Pinnacle that might interest you. Pays better too." After Gerald left, I sat in that conference room for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. 20 years of relationship building, of being there at 2 a.m. for crises, of treating people like human beings instead of revenue sources, had just paid off in a way Richard Sterling never anticipated. My phone buzzed. Text from Evan. "Dad, still coming to my game tonight? Big one against Travis High." I replied immediately. "Front row. Wouldn't miss it." The meeting with Richard happened at 4 p.m. in his office. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past 6 hours. Standing behind his desk was Leonard Hartwell, Sterling's board chairman and primary investor. "Michael," Leonard started, his voice carefully neutral, "we need to discuss the situation with Pinnacle. I'm listening. Gerald Whitmore has made his position clear. Either you receive the VP of Client Relations position with appropriate authority and compensation, or Pinnacle terminates their contract. Given that Pinnacle represents 38% of our annual revenue, we can't afford to lose them." I nodded but said nothing. Richard shifted uncomfortably. "We're prepared to offer you the VP position. 45% salary increase, full benefits package, your own team, and direct reporting to me." "To be clear," I said, "that would make me Derek's supervisor, not his colleague?" Richard flinched. "Yes. And Derek's current role would be reassigned." Leonard's voice was firm. "Derek would work under your direction as a client relations associate. If he demonstrates competence over the next year, he can advance based on merit." It was a good offer. Everything I'd wanted 5 days ago. But Gerald's words were still fresh in my mind. "You've never leveraged our relationship, never asked for anything." "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly. "But I need to make something clear. This isn't just about Pinnacle. Marcus Webb from Frontier National called me Thursday. Their $8 million contract is in play because Derek tried to pitch him on digital transformation instead of addressing their regulatory concerns. Sharon Delgado from Coastal Bank has been trying to reach me all week about SEC compliance questions. She's not returning Derek's calls." Richard's face went paler. "So here's what I need," I continued. "VP of Client Relations is fine, but I also need hiring authority for 2 senior relationship managers, people I train personally, not whoever's nephew needs a job. I need budget approval authority, up to $250,000 without requiring board sign-off, and I need Derek removed completely from client-facing roles. He can work in product development or marketing, but he doesn't touch my clients." "That's asking a lot," Leonard said. "You're facing a company-ending crisis because you promoted the wrong person. I'm asking for the authority to make sure it doesn't happen again." Leonard and Richard exchanged glances. Some silent negotiation happened in those few seconds of eye contact. "Agreed," Leonard finally said. "All your conditions. We'll have the paperwork ready Monday." "One more thing," I added. "Derek's reassignment gets announced company-wide. I want everyone to understand that credentials don't trump competence at Sterling." Richard looked like I'd punched him. "Michael, that's my nephew. And your nephew nearly destroyed your company in 4 days. People need to understand why decisions have consequences." The email went out at 8 a.m. Monday morning. Subject line, "Leadership Structure. Updates." The key paragraph was beautifully professional and completely clear. Effective immediately, Michael Harrington has been promoted to Vice President of Client Relations, reporting directly to CEO Richard Sterling. Derek Vanderbilt will transition to Associate Product Manager, where his strategic insights and educational background will support our development team. Sterling Financial Systems remains committed to maintaining the deep client relationships that have defined our success. The translation was obvious to everyone in the company. The CEO's nephew had failed spectacularly, and the person they'd tried to push aside was now his boss. Derek lasted 6 weeks. He showed up every day, sat through meetings where people who used to report to him now gave him assignments, and slowly realized that no amount of Wharton networking was going to rescue him from public professional humiliation. His resignation letter was short and blamed cultural fit issues. Richard lasted 8 months. The board forced him out in January after 2 more clients threatened to leave due to his strategic restructuring attempts. Leonard Hartwell took over as interim CEO and offered me the position. I declined. VP of Client Relations was exactly where I wanted to be. Close enough to clients to maintain relationships, senior enough to prevent future Derek situations, but not so high up that I'd miss another 6 years of Evan's life. The SEC compliance review I'd prioritized over that emergency meeting. Completed perfectly, submitted on time. The examiner actually commended Sterling for our attention to regulatory detail. When I mentioned to Gerald that we'd chosen compliance over client crisis management, he laughed for a solid minute. "That's why I trust you, Michael. You understand priorities." 6 months later, I was sitting in the front row of Evan's playoff basketball game. He scored 18 points, and when he looked into the crowd and saw me there, his grin was worth more than any executive title Sterling could have offered. After the game, as we walked to the car, Evan asked, "Dad, what changed at work?" "You've been around so much more. I realized I was giving everything to people who didn't value it and nothing to the person who mattered most. Sometimes you need to step back and let people see what they're taking for granted." "Is that why you're home for dinner every night now?" "Exactly. I wasn't going to miss your entire freshman year because some CEO thought his nephew's MBA mattered more than my 2 decades of actual work. Smart move, Dad. Smart kid. The banking industry is smaller than people think. Word spread fast about what happened at Sterling. How Gerald Whitmore had threatened to pull a $90 million contract to protect a relationship manager who'd been pushed aside. Within 3 months, I had 6 other banking CEOs reaching out personally, asking if Sterling was treating me well. Our client retention rate hit 98%. Here's what I learned from those 20 years and that one brutal week. Your value doesn't disappear just because someone with credentials and connections can't see it. Sometimes the most powerful response to being undervalued isn't rage or revenge. It's withdrawal. Step back, follow your actual job description, and let people feel the full weight of what they're losing. Richard Sterling learned that $90 million in revenue depended on relationships he couldn't replicate with an MBA in a famous business school. Derek learned that executive titles don't make you qualified to do the work. And I learned that being present for my son's basketball games was worth more than any promotion that required sacrificing another 6 years of his life. If you've ever been passed over for someone less qualified because they had the right connections or credentials, remember this. Real expertise compounds over years. It can't be replaced by a resume or a business school degree. Eventually, the market corrects itself. Eventually, the clients say, "We only work with Michael." Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people discover what they threw away. Drop a comment if you've ever watched someone with credentials fail at a job you could do in your sleep. Subscribe for more stories about what really happens when corporate politics crashes into actual competence. Trust me, these stories are more common than you'd think.